Hi there, Vladimir here, with a video about how to think in English. One of the most absurd things I've ever seen are YouTube videos of native speakers teaching us how to stop translating in our head, how to think in their native language. Say, native English speakers teaching us how to think in English, the vast majority of whom have never mastered a foreign language themselves, never thought in a foreign language themselves. Tell me, what is more absurd than that? It's like Queen Elizabeth or her son or grandsons teaching us how to think like a commoner, how to apply for a job. Tell us what it feels like to be poor. It's like me telling you what it feels like being Chinese in Japan. What goes through the mind of a Chinese living in Japan? It doesn't get more absurd than that. Or does it? Well, it does. What's even more absurd about such type of videos is the view count. Millions of people watching and watching and watching and liking and liking and liking. Why, people? Why? Question. Can you make a video about how to think in your native language and stop translating? If yes, then why bother watching? If no, then why bother watching? Only a person who has mastered a foreign language can tell you how to stop translating and think in the foreign language. Think, people. Think. Only a non-native English speaker can tell you how to think in English and stop translating. Think. I know I think. Vladimir thinks, therefore he is. I think Vladimir in English. In English. First thing first, why would anybody want to think in a foreign language, in English? Why would you Google this particular question? This should never be the goal of learning a foreign language. I want to think in English. Why? That's not the right mindset. It's the thought that counts, not the language. But it's what you want, so here is the answer. Here is how to think in English and stop translating in your head. A simple yet precise mathematical formula. TL2 minus TL1 times 5 greater than 0, where TL2 is the time you've spent with your second language, foreign language, English in our case. TL1 is the time you've spent with your first language, native language. The multiplier 5 denotes the last 5 years of your life. T can be seconds, minutes, hours, whatever unit of time you want to choose. Calculate both T's for the last 5 years. In other words, if for the last 5 years, or the next 5 years, TL2 is greater than TL1 times 5, which means if the time you spent reading, listening, writing, and speaking in English is at least 5 times greater, longer than your time with your native language, then you will most likely think in English and stop translating. I say most likely because it's not just about quantity. It is also very much about quality. If most of your L2 time is spent on passively watching YouTube videos, then I'm afraid that doesn't count for much. Since this video is all about numbers, let me give you another number. 10 hours of watching English learning videos on YouTube counts for less than 1 hour of quality listening practice. What constitutes quality time with the language, with English? Quality time is about deliberate reading and deliberate listening to interesting content, useful information, something you need for your job or are interested in. Not educational videos about learning English, not textbooks. No, the focus is on good quality information through English. Now, having said that, if you want to become an English teacher, then watching educational videos about learning English, teaching English, is quality time with the language. If for the last 5 years you've spent most of your time reading and listening to interesting content in English, then you will most likely think in English. Okay? Let's recap. First, why would you want to think in English? This should never be your goal. Second, for the last 5 years, time spent with English should be at least 5 times the time with your native language. Third, it's not just about quantity, but also quality. Reading and listening to interesting content. Fourth condition for avoiding mental translation is, yes, you guessed it, monolingual English dictionaries. Plain and simple. I'm gonna spend almost no time on the fourth condition. I talk a lot about monolingual dictionaries in my book, Virtually Native. A lot. Monolingual dictionaries. It's pretty self-explanatory. Monolingual means no translation. Such a no-brainer. Okay, number 5. You need to harmonize. Harmonize when you read, harmonize when you use monolingual dictionaries. Harmonizing is something I talk about a lot in my book. There is a whole chapter on language is music. Not songs. Language is music. By music, I mean every language has melody, rhythm, melodic flow. Without that sense of rhythm and melody, you will always translate in your head. Your output is very much dependent on your input, how you insert. How you encode all that vocabulary and grammar will determine how you retrieve it and use it later on. Your out is dependent on your in. Think about how you save your files on your computer. If you don't have a system of organizing your files in folders and subfolders, then you will have hard time retrieving them later on when you need them. Retrieve them quickly. It is quite similar with vocabulary and grammar. How quickly you find the suitable word and the correct grammar depends on how you saved it in the past. Once again, you need to spend a lot of quality time with the language, with English. You need to use monolingual dictionaries, and you need to harmonize. That is how you think in English and stop translating. It takes a long, long time. How about me? Do I think in English? Do I translate in my head? Again, this has never been my goal, but ever since I decided to make this video, I started paying attention to how I think. When I think about English, when I think about work, about my books, my students, my website, my YouTube channel, it is all in English. I don't think in my native Bulgarian. And one last thing I notice is that when I work out, do a set, I usually do it to failure. I usually start counting in English, 1, 2. But the last few reps I find myself counting in Bulgarian. 37, 37, 38, 39, 100. Funny, right? Our native language is our native language. What about mental translation? There is a whole chapter on speaking in my book Virtually Native, where I talk about mental translation. In the past, there was a bit of mental translation, I suppose, but that was long time ago, not anymore. And one of the main reasons is that I have always used monolingual dictionaries. I have always harmonized. And there is one more thing about mental translation that has to do with keywords. Something I call cues and functions. It's all in my books Virtually Native and English Grammar and Functions. So, there you have it. How to think in English and avoid mental translation. From a guy who has actually done it. Reached that level. It should never be your goal. You should spend quality time with the language. You should use monolingual dictionaries. You should harmonize. You should have a method for learning. Your output depends on your input. And last but not least, you should stop watching useless videos on YouTube and read my book Virtually Native. It's all in there, by a non-native for the non-native. Virtually Native is available on Amazon and virtuallynative.com.